Okay, so now that we've identified who's in that close contact circle, I'm going to call it, we need to decide how long they're going to be out depending on whether they're sick or not. So this is the symptomatic versus asymptomatic tree. Remember I said at the very beginning that's what the CDC looks at? So the incubation period for COVID is still 1 to 14 days, they think, right? That's what it's been, and that hasn't changed, at least to date. So the health department here, I kind of like the way that King County phrased it, so that's what I decided to cut and paste for the slide, but the CDC says the same thing. Any staff that have been within this close contact should not go to work for 14 days and quarantine themselves. That's who we need to send out of the workplace. And hold on, I'm going to talk about leave in a second, I promise. And then when can they come back? Well, guess what? It's these same milestones if somebody's been sick that we had before. So 14 days is no symptoms. The milestones are if there's symptoms, which kind of makes sense. This person, you don't know if they might have it. This person, you do. So you're going to follow that different set of rules. So what leave exists? Well, I put some stars here because we're back to this problem with the Families First Coronavirus Emergency Leave, which is us just telling somebody to go home for 14 days is probably not going to qualify for the Families First leave. However, remember, if we get a doctor to confirm that the employee needs to stay out that long, then we suddenly have the information we need to have them qualify for the federal leave. And I never want you to discourage employees from reaching out to their healthcare provider. That's a good rule of thumb anyway. So that's why I have that star there. But let's say, oh, heaven forbid, we get a really big spike again and it's nearly impossible to get in touch with a healthcare provider. Well, you're probably going to be stuck with just offering the employee their Washington or Seattle paid sick leave, or maybe you have a combined or universal PTO policy. That's going to be available to them for this quarantine period, or the period during which they're out awaiting diagnosis. And don't forget, if they become ill, more than 3 days, so this is somebody who actually really gets full-blown COVID, then they're going to qualify for the protections of the regular FMLA. Regular FMLA not paid, though. Regular Washington PFML paid through the state. This isn't an unemployment situation. I've mentioned it before, but I made it a separate slide. Can you require a negative COVID-19 test before somebody comes back to work? So the CDC is saying they strongly discourage this. They say to follow the 14 days quarantine or the symptomatic strategy. But again, we're kind of stuck with this catch-22 because if somebody's going to qualify for Families First Coronavirus Response Leave, we need that advice from the healthcare provider. So maybe the negative COVID-19 test isn't the way to go here. But again, I've had some of my clients who get set up with a local healthcare provider and are able to get testing pretty quickly. So I'm unable to give you specific advice for you here. But if you wanted to require the test, you could, legally speaking. If you didn't want to require the test, you don't have to, legally speaking. Okay, I'm going to pause before we talk about travel. Any questions?
We have a few questions here. Going back to one of the first ones, is there a COVID handbook available that can be shared? I know that one of the questions from the employer said that they have a COVID-19 handbook that they distribute to their employees. Is there something that Fisher Phillips has, or the CDC provides, or Department of Health provides?
So I guess I would need to know what topics there are. I don't have a Fisher Phillips. We have a lot on our website of forms that are free. We don't have an all-in-one book that I can share. I will also say that there's a lot of free stuff out there. I know the association recognizes that getting it all together is almost what seems more overwhelming. I would say if you went through and printed everything of all the landing pages I've given you today, you're going to end up with a pretty good guideline. If you're looking for things more specific, like, for example, I think it needs to be updated, but my hospitality group has a multi-state, restaurant guide about who has to wear masks and whether guests have to wear masks and leave and things like that. There's some tools like that to help you through. So maybe Lex, whoever that was, can send you or me a note afterwards and let us know, what kinds of things that they're looking for, and I might be able to guide some resources.
Okay. I have a question from Wendy. Is there a template with questions we should be asking our employees when they arrive at work?
So I assume that's a question directed towards symptom screening. So if you want to do symptom screening, the answer is yes, but that's not something I can provide for free. That would be constitutes legal advice, and so it'd be something you need to engage me or other outside counsel to look at. If you go to the CDC, though, again, there's a business FAQ, and I'm happy to send that to Lex and you, that talks about what kinds of questions that you use. But I've certainly developed pre-shift symptom screening questionnaires for some of my clients, and they do use those. Where they can be helpful is then you can use them in conjunction with some FCRA forms. But usually those questions are, you're asking about the recognized COVID symptoms, including having somebody identify if they have a fever or you provide a thermometer for them, and including where they've traveled. So yeah, there is stuff like that available. It's just not something that you're going to find for free unless you want to create your own following the CDC.
And I have a question from Anne here. Is the COVID testing free to the individual? I have received bills from healthcare places.
No, COVID testing is not free unless you pay attention to when there's a free one. I'm smiling because we had a free one up where I live in Tukwila. My husband headed up because he's got a mother who's 82 years old, and he was just concerned because he'd been around her and got it done. But generally, it's something you're going to have to pay for, and particularly if the employer is requiring it, the rule of thumb is going to be that the employer needs to pay for it. And this is basically because there is no mandate that individuals get tested before they return to work. So just like we would pay for a pre-employment drug screening test, it's kind of the same sort of rationale here.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, yeah. So we'll certainly follow up on those other things and give some guidance there. Thanks for the questions. So let us go to these travel issues.